Well, Solon Robinson was the founder of Crown Point. He came to Lake County early in 1834, and he started buying up property through grants through the Native Americans, and he became what was known as the squatter king, because if a land was unoccupied and he stayed on it, anyone stayed on it for a time, then they could claim ownership.
He's a self-educated man. His dad died at his early age, and he had to fend for the family. You can attribute the fact that he was a co-founder of the U.S. Department of Agriculture. He wrote about 6 different books, and if you have a chance to read them, Dime a Day in New York is a very good one. Hot Corn is another one. They're very, very good books to read, very interesting, still apropos to today. He was very interested in agriculture.
Solon Robinson later left Crown Point in his later years and moved down to Florida, down to Jacksonville, I believe it is. And there he was buried. And a few years ago, let's say 10 years ago, maybe 10 years ago, the Crown Point group got together and decided to exhume his remains and move them back up here to Crown Point to be buried next to his wife in the cemetery, which they did. Well, the Cobe Race took place in Crown Point in 1909. It was a cross-country race. It was followed a track starting in Crown Point, ran all the way down to Cedar Lake and to Lowell, and then across to the 9-mile stretch, which is the 9-mile stretch of the Cobe Race. That's why they call it that. Back up to Crown Point. And it was a big event. Crown Point making a lot of preparations. They had bleachers all over the place. Hotels were expected to do a big business. In fact, they had really inflated the prices. And the problem is, not many people showed up. It kind of was a bust. And so the following race was held in Indianapolis, and that was the Indianapolis 500. So the precursor of the Indianapolis 500 was here at Crown Point. The Cobe Race was won by Mr. Chevrolet. It was built in the 1880s, and it was the sheriff's house because back then part of the fringe benefits of being the county sheriff was they provided a house for you to live in. So you lived in the front part of the house, and the back part was the jail. And our sheriff's house is significant because that's where Dillenger made his escape in 1934. Some people say it was a wooden gun, some people say it was a soap gun, card of soap. But actually, according to people that we've talked to whose relatives were there, they claim it was a real gun. And they said you would certainly know it was a real gun when it was sticking in the back of your neck. It was not a gun of wood or soap. And the reason they made up this story was because local politicians, syndicate of East Chicago and Indiana Harbor, smuggled that gun in to break him out of jail, because if he stayed in jail, he could talk, squeal, and put a lot of people, prominent people, probably in jeopardy. The lady in red, who, for example, at the Biograph Theater, she was not dressed in red, she was dressed in an orange. But she was part of the syndicate. She was a prostitute in Indiana Harbor, which is, Indiana Harbor was quite notorious back in the 1930s. Bootlegging and all kinds of problems. He was a gangster. He was notorious. He robbed banks. You have to understand, it's during the Depression, right after the Great Crash of '29. And I think a lot of people were looking for a hero, and as we know, even in today's terms, people don't always choose the best people for heroes. And so a lot of people looked at him as a Robin Hood, but again, if you look at the facts, you'll find that there were newspaper articles where he would rob a bank and some farmer would be standing there, they said, with $3,000 in his hand, and Dillenger would say, well, you can keep your money. He was responsible for killing people, and we can't overlook that fact. It could be him, or it could be his gang, which he was with. that was responsible. So I mean, you have to be guilty by association too. So I think it's 6, I believe. Sergeant O'Malley, who was the bank guard in East Chicago, that was supposedly gunned down by Dillenger, or somebody that looked awful like him. And then there were 2 patrolmen here, both are buried in Portage. They were killed gangland style in their squad cars by apparently part of Dillinger's gang. So yeah, did Dillenger pull the trigger on all of these people? Probably not, but again, would they have been there if Dillenger wasn't there? Well, the FBI had a stakeout in Chicago. He was staying with several prostitutes, girlfriends of his. And the lady in red, Anne Sage, was a Romanian visitor to the United States. She didn't have a visa, and she was on a temporary, and so she was going to be deported. But they said if she would help them finger Dillenger, then they wouldn't deport her. So that's why she turned him in. They were supposed to go to a different movie, but they chose, it was a very hot evening, and they chose this one movie because it was air conditioned. And so they went there, and as they were coming out, why Anne Sage walked away from Dillenger, and then they mowed him down with machine guns.